When Magnus Carlsen, the undisputed chess world champion, agreed to play an exhibition match against Pope Leo XIV for charity, he thought it would be nothing more than a publicity stunt. But when the American Pope made a move that no grandmaster had seen in 50 years, the Norwegian prodigy realized he wasn't facing an amateur. And what happened at the end didn't just shake the chess world. It revealed why this Pope sees moves others can't even imagine. But before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The Vatican's Apostolic Palace had been transformed into an unlikely venue for what the media dubbed the match of faith versus logic. Cameras from every major news outlet positioned themselves around a simple wooden table where two men would soon face each other across 64 squares. Magnus Carlsen arrived early, his confident stride and designer suit marking him as a man who owned every room he entered. At 33, he'd been world champion for over a decade, his mind a supercomputer that could calculate millions of positions in seconds. "This should take about 10 minutes, Magnus told his manager Lars while adjusting the chess pieces on the hand-carved board. "I'll play a clean game, make it look competitive for maybe 20 moves, then end it gracefully. Good PR for everyone." Lars nodded, checking his phone.
"The Pope's people asked if you could explain your moves as you play. You know, make it educational for the viewers."
Magnus smirked.
"Educational? I'll try to keep it simple enough for religious minds to follow."
Cardinal Toretti, who had helped organize the event, overheard the comment but said nothing. He simply made a note on his tablet and continued preparing the room. The charity match would raise funds for children's hospitals across Europe, combining the Pope's humanitarian mission with Carlsen's celebrity status.
"Your Holiness,"
Cardinal Toretti said, approaching Pope Leo XIV in the adjoining chamber.
"Mr. Carlsen has arrived. He seems confident."
Pope Leo XIV looked up from his worn Bible, his eyes twinkling with an emotion the cardinal couldn't quite place.
"Confidence is a gift, Antonio, though sometimes it can blind us to unexpected possibilities."
"If I may ask,"
the cardinal ventured carefully,
"how familiar are you with chess? Mr. Carlsen is considered perhaps the greatest player in history."
The Pope stood, straightening his simple white cassock.
"My father taught me when I was 7. We played every evening in our Chicago apartment until he passed. After that,
His voice grew distant.
chess became my way of keeping his memory alive."
"But surely,
Cardinal Toretti pressed gently.
you understand this is Magnus Carlsen? He became a grandmaster at 13. His rating is the highest ever achieved."
Pope Leo XIV smiled with that characteristic warmth that had endeared him to millions.
"Numbers tell us many things, Antonio, but they don't tell us everything. Shall we go? I wouldn't want to keep Mr. Carlsen waiting."
As they entered the main chamber, the contrast between the two men was immediately apparent. Magnus sat with the casual arrogance of someone who had never met an intellectual equal, while Pope Leo XIV moved with the quiet dignity of someone who had nothing to prove.
"Mr. Carlsen,"
The Pope said warmly, extending his hand.
"thank you for supporting this wonderful cause."
Magnus stood, shaking hands with practiced politeness.
"Your Holiness, it's an interesting choice, chess for a charity event. I suppose it beats another boring gala dinner."
"Indeed,
Pope Leo XIV agreed, taking his seat.
though I find chess far from boring. It's a universe of infinite possibilities contained in a simple board, rather like faith itself."
Magnus's eyebrow arched slightly.
"Faith has rules that can be calculated and proven. Chess is pure logic."
"Is it?
The Pope asked mildly, arranging his pieces with careful precision.
I've always found chess to be more about understanding human nature than mere calculation."
The cameras rolled as Magnus made the traditional first move, pawn to e4. Standard, classical, an opening that had launched a million games. Pope Leo XIV responded instantly, pawn to e5, matching the champion's pace.
"Traditional response,"
Magnus commented for the cameras, his tone slightly patronizing.
"Safe, conservative. What you'd expect from..."
He caught himself up.
"From someone who values tradition."
The game progressed through familiar patterns. Magnus developed his pieces with mechanical precision, each move designed to build small advantages that would eventually cascade into victory. Pope Leo XIV matched him move for move, neither falling behind nor attempting anything spectacular.
"You play well for an amateur,"
Magnus said after the 15th move, genuine surprise creeping into his voice.
"Who taught you?"
"My father."
Pope Leo XIV replied, castling his king to safety.
He was a factory worker who believed chess taught life lessons. Patience, sacrifice, thinking of others before yourself.
Magnus smirked.
Romantic notions. Chess is about domination, control, forcing your opponent to submit to your superior calculation.
He moved his bishop aggressively.
Like this.
Pope Leo XIV studied the position for a long moment. The cameras zoomed in on his weathered hands as he reached for his knight. What happened next made Magnus lean forward for the first time. The Pope's knight landed on a square that seemed to accomplish nothing. It didn't threaten any pieces, didn't improve his position in any obvious way. Magnus frowned, his supercomputer mind running through variations. Why would...
Interesting,
Magnus muttered, then louder for the audience.
An unusual move. Not in any opening database I know.
He tried to sound dismissive, but those who knew him caught the note of intrigue.
Databases.
Pope Leo XIV mused, making his next move with serene confidence.
Yes, I imagine you've memorized thousands of games. Tell me, Mr. Carlsen, do you still find joy in chess? Or has it become mere pattern recognition?
Magnus's hand hovered over his bishop. The question had caught him off guard, but more disturbing was the position on the board. The Pope's pieces seemed randomly placed, yet something about their configuration nagged at him. Like seeing a constellation that almost, but not quite, formed a recognizable pattern.
Joy is irrelevant,
Magnus replied curtly.
Excellence is what matters. Winning is what matters.
And yet,
Pope Leo XIV said gently,
you chose to use your excellence for charity today. That suggests something beyond mere winning drives you.
Magnus moved sharply, his patience beginning to fray. This was supposed to be a simple exhibition, not a philosophical debate. But as the Pope responded with another bewildering move, Magnus felt the first tremor of uncertainty. The position was unlike anything in his vast mental database. The Pope's pieces seemed scattered, purposeless. Yet Magnus's finely tuned instinct screamed that danger lurked somewhere in the chaos. He spent 5 minutes on his next move, then 10, aware that cameras were capturing his unprecedented hesitation.
The clock is generous today.
Pope Leo XIV observed kindly.
In life, we rarely have such luxury to consider our choices.
I don't need your clock.
Magnus snapped, then caught himself.
I mean, I'm simply being thorough. For the audience.
He made what should have been a crushing move, a tactic that would win material in 5 moves. Elementary, really. The kind of combination he could execute in his sleep. Pope Leo XIV's response was immediate. A quiet pawn push that shouldn't have mattered. But as Magnus calculated the consequences, his face paled. The pawn move had changed everything. His carefully planned combination now led nowhere. Worse, he realized the Pope's seemingly random pieces suddenly coordinated in a pattern he'd never seen before.
How ...
Magnus whispered, then caught himself.
I mean, another interesting choice. Very creative.
Cardinal Toretti watched the champion's growing agitation with amazement. He'd seen Magnus play dozens of games, always with the same robotic efficiency. But now the Norwegian was sweating, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. 20 moves later, the position had transformed into something that defied classification. Magnus found himself in a type of position that didn't exist in any chess manual, facing threats he couldn't quite identify but could feel pressing against his defenses like water against a dam.
Your style,
Magnus said, his voice strained.
I don't recognize it. Which school of chess is this?
Pope Leo XIV smiled gently.
The Chicago Public Library School. We had 3 chess books and a dozen players who met every Saturday. We had to invent our own understanding.
That's impossible,
Magnus burst out.
Chess has been studied for centuries. Every position has been analyzed. You can't just invent new patterns.
Can't you?
The Pope asked mildly, making another move that seemed to tighten invisible coils around Magnus's position.
I find that limitation exists more in our minds than in reality. When you have few resources, you'll learn to see possibilities others miss.
Magnus stared at the board. His position looked fine on the surface, but he could feel the ground shifting beneath him. Every calculation led to complications he couldn't fully grasp. It was like playing in a fog where shapes loomed but never quite resolved into clarity. The cameras captured every bead of sweat on the world champion's forehead, every nervous twitch as his legendary confidence crumbled. The online commentary had exploded into chaos as grandmasters around the world tried to evaluate a position that defied conventional analysis.
This is...
Magnus started, then stopped. He couldn't admit he was lost. Not him. Not the highest-rated player in history. He made a move designed to simplify, to trade pieces and reach a position he could understand. Pope Leo XIV's hand moved with the same calm certainty it had shown while blessing children or comforting the sick. A rook slid across the board to a square that made Magnus freeze. Number it couldn't be. But as his mind raced through variations, the truth became undeniable. In 7 moves, maybe 8, he would be checkmated. Every defensive try led to a different beautiful finale. The Pope had woven a net of possibility that left no escape.
I believe
Pope Leo XIV said softly,
this is what players call Zugzwang. Any move worsens your position. A reminder that sometimes our greatest strength is knowing when to be still.
Magnus's hand trembled as he reached for his king. His mind, that perfect chess machine, ran through variation after variation. Each one ended the same way. The unthinkable had happened. He'd been outplayed by a priest who learned chess in a Chicago library. With sudden violence, Magnus's fist slammed down on the table. Pieces jumped and scattered. The king he'd been reaching for toppled and rolled onto the floor.
This is impossible,
He roared, shooting to his feet.
You're not in any database. These patterns don't exist. What kind of trick is this?
The room froze. Cameras captured the world champion's complete meltdown as chess pieces scattered across the ornate Vatican floor. Cardinal Toretti stepped forward in alarm, but Pope Leo XIV raised a gentle hand to stop him. Magnus stood shaking, his face flushed with rage and humiliation.
No one beats me like this. No one. Especially not some priest who thinks he understands chess because his daddy taught him a few moves.
The words hung in the air like poison. Several witnesses gasped at the disrespect, but Pope Leo XIV simply stood and walked around the table toward the trembling champion.
Magnus,
He said softly, placing a hand on the younger man's shoulder. The touch seemed to drain the rage from Magnus like water from a broken vessel.
sit with me.
Don't touch me.
Magnus said, but the words lacked force. His legs seemed to give out as he slumped back into his chair.
Where did you learn to play like that?
Pope Leo XIV began gathering the scattered pieces, handling each one with reverence.
You asked the wrong question earlier. It's not about which school or which database. It's about why we play.
Magnus watched numbly as the Pope reset the board.
I play to win.
No,
Pope Leo XIV said gently,
you play to prove something. To prove you're special, that your mind makes you superior. But that's a burden, isn't it? The constant need to defend your throne?
You don't understand, Magnus muttered. I've been world champion since I was 22. Everyone expects me to win, always. Do you know what that pressure feels like?
I know what it feels like to carry others' expectations.
the Pope replied.
But tell me, when did you last play chess for joy? When did you last see beauty in a position without calculating its evaluation?
Magnus stared at the reset board.
I don't remember.
My father worked double shifts at the factory.
Pope Leo XIV continued.
He was tired every evening, his hands scarred from machinery. But for 1 hour each night, we played chess, not to become champions, but to share something beautiful together.
He moved a pawn forward, a different opening this time.
He taught me that chess wasn't about defeating an opponent. It was about creating something together. A dance of minds. A shared exploration of possibility.
Magnus looked at the simple pawn move.
But you just crushed me. Completely.
Did I?
Pope Leo XIV asked.
Or did I show you something new? For perhaps the first time in years, you faced mystery instead of memorization. Didn't you feel it? The excitement of not knowing?
Magnus's hand moved almost involuntarily to match the Pope's pawn.
Those patterns, I've never seen anything like them.
Because you've been looking in the wrong places.
The Pope explained, making another move.
Chess mastery isn't about memorizing every game played before. It's about understanding why we play at all.
They continued moving pieces, but now it felt different. Magnus found himself actually looking at the position instead of calculating databases.
In Peru,
Pope Leo XIV said,
I taught chess to street children. They had no books, no computers, just a board I carved from wood and pieces made from bottle caps. But they played with such joy, such creativity. They reminded me what I'd forgotten in seminary. That wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about remaining open to wonder.
Magnus made a move, then actually smiled.
This position, It's becoming something interesting.
Every position is interesting when you stop trying to control it.
The Pope replied.
You've spent so many years proving you're the best that you've forgotten why chess is beautiful. It's not about domination, Magnus. It's about dialogue.
A dialogue? Magnus asked, genuinely curious now.
Every move is a question.
Pope Leo XIV explained.
Every response is part of a conversation. When you play only to win, you're having a monologue. But when you play to discover, you create something no other player could imagine alone.
Magnus studied the position with new eyes. The pieces seemed to dance with possibility rather than march toward predetermined outcomes.
I used to see it that way, when I was young. Before ...
Before the world told you that winning was everything.
The Pope suggested gently.
Before your gift became your prison.
Magnus's eyes glistened.
How do you understand this?
Because every gift can become a burden when we forget its purpose.
Pope Leo XIV replied.
I nearly left the priesthood once, convinced I wasn't worthy. I'd turned my calling into a performance, trying to be perfect instead of being present.
They played on in companionable silence. The camera still rolled, but the atmosphere had transformed completely. This wasn't a competition anymore. It was two souls meeting across a checkered board.
That pattern you used,
Magnus said eventually.
the one that defeated me. Where did it really come from?
Pope Leo XIV smiled.
Would you believe me if I said it came from watching my father's hands? He was a craftsman, and his movements had a rhythm, a purpose that went beyond efficiency. I started seeing chess the same way, not as a problem to solve, but as a craft to practice with love.
Love,
Magnus repeated, the word foreign in a chess context.
I've analyzed millions of games, but I've never thought about love.
Yet it's there in every beautiful combination.
The Pope suggested.
Every sacrifice that creates harmony, every quiet move that reveals hidden truth. Chess at its best is an act of love. Love for beauty, for truth, for the mysterious way pieces can create meaning together.
Magnus made a spectacular sacrifice, not for advantage, but for the sheer joy of watching the position transform. Pope Leo XIV's eyes lit up with delight.
Yes!
The Pope exclaimed.
Do you see how the board sings when you play from your soul instead of your database?
For the first time in years, Magnus laughed. Really laughed. Not the calculated media chuckle, but genuine joy.
I'd completely forgotten why I started playing.
We all forget sometimes.
Pope Leo XIV said kindly.
That's why we need each other, to remind us who we really are beneath our titles and achievements.
They played 3 more games that afternoon, each one a journey rather than a battle. Magnus discovered patterns he'd never imagined. Not because they were in some hidden database, but because he'd finally stopped looking for what he already knew. As the event concluded, Magnus stood and embraced the Pope, cameras capturing the world champion with tears streaming down his face.
Thank you,
He whispered.
Thank you for giving me back my love for chess.
Thank yourself.
Pope Leo XIV replied.
You had the courage to let go of certainty and embrace mystery. That's the hardest move of all.
In the weeks that followed, the chess world buzzed with analysis of that first game. Grandmasters couldn't reach consensus on the Pope's mysterious patterns. Some claimed they were entirely new to chess theory. Others insisted they must have ancient roots. But Magnus Carlsen knew the truth. In an interview that went viral, he said simply,
Pope Leo XIV didn't beat me with superior calculation or hidden preparation. He showed me that I'd been playing only half the game. I'd mastered the science of chess, but forgotten its soul. He plays from a place I'm only beginning to understand, where every move is a prayer and every game is a chance to create something sacred with another human being.
The charity event raised millions for children's hospitals, but its true legacy was the world champion, who began playing differently, who started teaching children for free, who learned to find God not in victory, but in the infinite mystery between two minds meeting across 64 squares. And in chess clubs around the world, players began to ask not, what would the computer play? But what would bring joy? The game's soul, nearly lost to engines and databases, began to breathe again. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't about winning at all. They're about remembering why we play. And if you enjoyed this story, please share your thoughts in the comments below. God bless you.